Hello. Good evening. Mabisuke here, the Kitsune Gamer. Today is another ASMR Friday, and we are going to be continuing with the Warriors Into the Wild book. We are currently on chapter 16, and we are going to be going to chapter 20. So that's another 5 chapters, and I think next Friday is going to be the last 5 chapters of this book. So we are over halfway done after today, but we'll be quite well into the book, and I think next week will be the finale of the book. So, as a recap for the previous chapters, thanks for the normal bell, Holy. As a recap for the previous chapters, we know that the house cat, quote unquote Rusty, turned into Firepaw, and we know that some of the deputies died in some of the clans. And in the most recent chapter, we had Firepaw, which used to be called a Rusty, go with the clan leader to the rock inside of a cave, and it shone moonlight on it, and the leader was supposed to have some visions from that while they slept, and Firepaw apparently had visions as well, which seemed like the clan might be attacked. So we might see some of that in the couple chapters following. We might actually get into some war mechanics from the warrior cats clans. So without further ado, I guess I will start on chapter 16. They headed back the way they had come. The moon had disappeared behind the bank of clouds. It was dark, but at least the Thunderpath was quieter now. The only monster they heard was far off in the distance. The cats crossed the path together and pushed their way through the hedge on the other side. Firepaw could feel his muscles growing stiff with tiredness as they hurried on. So, in the previous chapter, they had to cross the road, and they also, before they set off on their journey to the rock, they were supposed to eat some herbs to cater to their hunger. So they are very hungry, very tired from their long journey. Hello, Husky. Thank you for the lurk. Bluestar kept up with a swift pace, with her nose thrust forward and her tail high. Tigerclaw loped beside her. Firepaw followed a few paces behind with Greypaw, but Ravenpaw was flagging. "Keep up, Ravenpaw," Tigerclaw growled over his shoulder. Ravenpaw flinched and bounded forwards until he caught up with Firepaw and Greypaw. "Are you okay?" Firepaw asked. "Yes," Ravenpaw panted, not meeting Firepaw's eyes, just a bit tired. They scrambled down a deep ditch and up the other side. "What did Tigerclaw say when he came out of the cave?" Firepaw meowed, trying not to sound too curious. "He wanted to check that we were still guarding the entrance," replied Greypaw. "Why?" Firepaw hesitated. "Did you sense anything strange about him?" he asked. "Only that damp old cave," Greypaw mewed, looking surprised. "He seemed a little edgy," ventured Ravenpaw. "He wasn't the only one," Greypaw meowed, looking at the black cat. "What do you mean?" asked Ravenpaw. "Just that the fur on your neck stands up whenever you see him these days," whispered Greypaw. "He nearly jumped out of your skin when he came out of the cave." "You have to admit, it was a bit creepy," by Mother Mouth. "I suppose so," agreed Greypaw. The cat slipped under a hedge into a cornfield that glowed silver in the moonlight, and followed the ditch that ran around its edge. "So what was it like inside, Firepaw?" Greypaw demanded. Did you see the moonstone? Yes, I did. It was amazing. Firepaw felt his fur tingle at the memory. Graypaw shot him an admiring glance. So it's true. The rock really does shine underground. Firepaw didn't reply. He closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the image of the moonstone that dazzled his mind. Then pictures from his dream crowded into his head, and his eyes shot open. Bluestar was right. They had to get back to camp as quickly as possible. Ahead, Tigerclaw and Bluestar had leaped through a fence out of the cornfield. The apprentices followed, squeezing under the fence onto an earth rack. It was the path that led past the two-leg nest and the dogs. Firepaw looked up and saw Bluestar and Tigerclaw trotting tirelessly together, silhouetted against a skyline tinged with red. The sun would be rising soon. Look, he called to Graypaw and Ravenpaw. An unfamiliar cat had jumped out in front of the two warriors. It's a loner, hissed Graypaw. The three apprentices hurried forward. The stranger was a stout black and white Tom, shorter than the warriors, but well-muscled. This is Barley, Bluestar explained to the apprentices as they caught up. He lives near the two-leg nest. Hi, meowed the cat. I haven't seen any of your clan for some moons. How are you, Bluestar? I'm well, thank you, replied Bluestar. And you, Barley? How's the prey been running since we last passed this way? Not so bad, replied Barley, with an amiable gleam in his eye. One good thing about two legs. You always find plenty of rats nearby. The black and white Tom went on. You seem in more of a hurry than usual. Is everything all right? Tigerclaw looked at Barley. A growl rumbled deep in his chest. Firepaw could sense that the warrior was suspicious of the loner's curiosity. I don't like to be away from my clan too long, Bluestar answered smoothly. As always, Bluestar, you are tied to your clan like a queen to her kids, observed Barley, not unkindly. Read that a little too quickly. What is it you want, Barley? Asked Tigerclaw. Barley flashed him a reproachful look. I just wanted to warn you that there are two dogs here now. You'd be safer going back into the cornfield instead of past the yard. We know about the dogs. We saw them earlier, Tigerclaw began impatiently. We are grateful to you for the warning, interrupted Bluestar. Thank you, Barley. Until next time. Barley flicked his tail. Have a safe journey, he meowed as he bounded way up the track. Come, ordered Bluestar, heading off the track. She pushed her way through the long grass between the path and the fence that led back into the cornfield. The three apprentices followed, but Tigerclaw hesitated. You trust the word of a loner? He meowed. Bluestar stopped and turned to face him. Would he rather face those dogs? They were tied up when we passed them earlier, Tigerclaw pointed out. They may be untied now. We're going this way, meowed Bluestar. She ducked under the fence into the field. Firepaw slipped after her, followed by Graypaw, Ravenpaw, and finally Tigerclaw. By now, the sun had lifted its head above the horizon. The hedgerows sparkled with dew, promising another warm day. The cats padded along the edge of the ditch. Firepaw looked down into the deep gully, steep-sided and filled with nettles. Firepaw could smell prey scent. There was something familiar about the bitter odor, but it was one he hadn't smelled for a long time. An ear-splitting squeal made Firepaw whip around. Ravenpaw was struggling and clawing at the earth. Something had hold of his leg and was dragging him down into the ditch. "Rats," spat Tigerclaw. "Barley has sent us into a trap." Before they could react, all 5 cats were surrounded. Huge brown rats swarmed out of the ditch, squeaking shrilly. Firepaw could see their sharp front teeth glinting in the early dawn light. Suddenly, one leaped onto Firepaw's shoulder. Fiery pain shot through his shoulder as the rat sank its teeth into his flesh. Another grasped his leg between its powerful jaws. Firepaw flung himself down and writhed madly, trying to shake free. He knew the rats were not as strong as he was, but there were so many of them. Yowls, hisses, and spits told him that the others were also being attacked. Firepaw slashed fiercely with his claws, slicing out at a rat that held onto his leg. It let go, but another one gripped his tail. Fast as lightning, powered by fear and rage, Firepaw fought and hacked at his attackers. Twisting his head around, he sank his teeth into the rat that had embedded itself into his shoulders. He felt the bones of its neck crunch in his mouth and its body go limp before it fell away onto the dirt track. Firepaw gasped with pain as yet another rat leaped onto his back and sank its teeth in. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a flash of white fur. For a moment, he was confused. Then he felt the rat being dragged off him. Firepaw spun around to see Barley flinging the rodent into the ditch. Without hesitating, Barley glanced around and sprinted over to Bluestar. She was writhing on the path, covered in rats. In a flash, Barley had the spine of one between his teeth and was plucking it off her with practiced ease. He spat it to the ground and grabbed another in his mouth as Bluestar thrashed beneath him. Firepaw rushed over to Greypaw, who was being attacked from both sides by 2 smaller rats. Firepaw lunged at the nearest one, giving it a bite that left it dead. Greypaw managed to turn and pin down the other with his claws. He grabbed it with his teeth and flung it onto the ditch as hard as he could. It did not come back. "They're running away," Tigerclaw yelled. Sure enough, the remaining rats were fleeing into the safety of the ditch. Firepaw could hear the scrabbling of small paws disappearing into the nettles. The bite in his shoulder and hind leg stung sharply. He looked carefully at his fur, wet and matted with blood, its sharp tang mingling with the stench of rats. Firepaw looked around for Ravenpaw. Greypaw was standing at the edge of the nettles, mewing encouragement as Ravenpaw pulled himself out of the ditch, muddy and stung. A young rat was still hanging onto his tail. Firepaw bounded over and finished it off quickly, while Greypaw helped to pull Ravenpaw over the top of the ditch. Now Firepaw looked for Bluestar. He saw Barley first, standing at top of the ditch, scanning the depths for more rats. Bluestar was lying on the path nearby. Alarmed, Firepaw dashed to his leader's side. The thick gray fur at the back of her neck was drenched with blood. "Bluestar," he mewed. Blue Star did not reply. A furious yowl made Firepaw look up. Tiger Claw leaped on top of Barley and pinned him to the ground. "You sent us into a trap," he snarled. "I did not know rats were here," spat Barley, his paws scrabbling in the dust as he struggled to stand up. "Why did you send us this way?" hissed Tiger Claw. The dogs were tied when we passed them earlier. The two-leg unties them at night. They guard his nest," Barley panted, wheezing under the weight of Tiger Claw's massive paws. "Tiger Claw, Blue Star is injured," Firepaw burst out. Tiger Claw released Barley at once. Barley got up and shook the dust from his coat. The great warrior bounded over to Blue Star's side and sniffed her wounds. "Is there anything we can do?" Firepaw asked. "She's in the hands of StarClan now," meowed Tiger Claw solemnly, stepping back. Firepaw opened his eyes wide with shock. Did Tiger Claw mean that Blue Star was dead? His fur prickled as he looked down at his leader. Was this what the spirits at Moonstone had warned her about? Graypaw and Ravenpaw had joined them and stood beside their leader, horror-struck. Barley hung back, craning his neck to see what was happening. Blue Star's eyes were open but glazed, and her gray body lay motionless. She didn't even appear to be breathing. "Is she dead?" whispered Ravenpaw. "I don't know. We must wait and see," replied Tiger Claw. The 5 cats waited in silence as the sun began to climb into the sky. Firepaw found himself wordlessly begging StarClan to protect his leader, to send her back to them. Then Blue Star stirred. The end of her tail twitched, and she lifted her head. "Blue Star?" mewed Firepaw, his voice trembling. "It's all right," Blue Star rasped. "I am still here. I have lost a life, but it wasn't my 9th. Joy flooded Firepaw. He looked at Tiger Claw, expecting to see relief on his face, but the Dark Warrior was expressionless. "Right," Tiger Claw meowed in a commanding tone. Ravenpaw, fetch cobwebs for Blue Star's wounds. Graypaw, find Marigold and Horsetail." The 2 apprentices dashed away. "Barley, I think you should leave us now." Firepaw looked over to the loner who had fought so bravely to help them. He wanted to thank them, but under Tiger Claw's fierce gaze, he didn't dare. Instead of speaking, Firepaw gave Barley a tiny nod. Barley seemed to understand, for he nodded in return and left without another word. Blue Star was still lying on the dirt track. "Is everyone all right?" she asked hoarsely. Tiger Claw nodded. Ravenpaw came charging back, his left forepaw wrapped in a thick wad of cobwebs. "Here," he mewed. "Shall I put them on our wounds?" Firepaw asked Tiger Claw. Yellowfang showed me how. "Very well," agreed Tiger Claw. He walked away and scanned the ditch again. His ears pricked for more rats. Firepaw peeled a clump of cobwebs from Ravenpaw's paw and began to press them firmly to Blue Star's wounds. She winced under his touch. If it had not been for Tiger Claw, those rats would have eaten me alive, she murmured, her voice tight with pain. "It wasn't Tiger Claw who saved you, it was Barley." Firepaw whispered as he took more cobwebs from Ravenpaw. "Barley?" Blue Star sounded surprised. "Is he here?" "Tiger Claw sent him away," Firepaw answered quietly. "He thinks Barley sent us into a trap." "And what do you think?" Blue Star rasped. Firepaw didn't look up, but concentrated on pressing the last bit of cobweb into place. Barley is a loner. What would he gain by sending us into a trap, only to rescue us from it? He mewed eventually. Bluestar laid down her head and closed her eyes again. Greypaw returned with some horsetail. Firepaw chewed the leaves and spat the juice onto Bluestar's wounds. He knew it would help stop infection, but he still wished Spotted Leaf were with him, with the knowledge and confidence in healing. "We should rest here while Bluestar recovers," announced Tigerclaw, padding up. "No," Bluestar insisted. "We must return to the camp," narrowing her eyes in pain. She struggled to her paws. "Let's keep going." The ThunderClan leader limped along the edge of the field. Tigerclaw walked at her side, his face dark with unknowable thoughts. The apprentices exchanged glances and then followed. "It is a long time since I saw you lose a life, Bluestar." Firepaw overheard Tigerclaw's whispered words. "How many have you lost now?" Firepaw couldn't help feeling surprised at Tigerclaw's open curiosity. "That was my 5th, replied Bluestar quietly. Firepaw strained his ears, but Tigerclaw did not reply. He padded on, lost in thought. That was the end of chapter 16. We are going to go ahead and start chapter 17. Sun High came and went as the cats made their way through WindClan's old hunting grounds. Their heavy silence showed that they were still sore after the rat fight. Hi, Holy. Are you here only for the fish and not for me? Firepaw felt scratched and bitten all over. You could see Greypaw was limping, occasionally hopping on 3 legs to protect his injured back leg. But it was Bluestar who worried him the most. Her pace was even slower now, but she refused to stop and rest. The grim look on her face, clouded by pain, told Firepaw how much she wanted to reach the ThunderClan camp. Don't worry about ShadowClan warriors, she meowed through gritted teeth as Tigerclaw paused to sniff the air. You won't find any here today. How could she be so sure? Firepaw wondered. They picked their way carefully down the steep, rocky hillside that led to 4 trees and joined the familiar trail that led home. It was late afternoon, and Firepaw began to think longingly of his nest and Plump helping a fresh kill. I can still smell the stench of ShadowClan, Greypaw muttered to Firepaw as they trekked through ThunderClan's hunting grounds. Perhaps the breeze has carried it down from WindClan's territory, Firepaw suggested. He could smell it too, and his whiskers were trembling. Suddenly, Ravenpaw stopped. Can you hear that? He mewed in a hushed voice. Firepaw strained his ears. At first, he only heard familiar sounds of the forest. Ads are going to start in 3 minutes. If you haven't already, make sure to turn down the volume so it doesn't spook you. And I'm going to take a small break once the ad starts. Thank you. At first, he only heard the familiar sounds of the forest, leaves rustling, a pigeon calling. Then his blood ran cold. In the distance, he could hear battle-hungry yowls and the shrill squeal of terrified kits. Quick, Bluestar howled. It is as StarClan warned me. Our camp is being attacked. She tried to leap forward, but stumbled. She pushed herself up and limped onwards. Tigerclaw and Firepaw pelted forward side by side. Greypaw and Ravenpaw followed. Their tail fur bristled to twice its usual size. Firepaw forgot his soreness as he charged towards the camp. His only concern was to protect the clan. The sounds of battle grew louder and louder as he neared the camp entrance, and the stench of ShadowClan filled his nostrils. He was right behind Tiger Claw as the cats dashed through the tunnel and into the clearing. They were met by a frenzy of fighting, the ThunderClan cats batting fiercely with ShadowClan warriors. The kits were out of sight, and Firepaw hoped they were safely hidden in the nursery. He guessed the weakest elders would be sheltering inside the hollow trunk of their fallen tree. Every corner of the camp seemed alive with warriors. Firepaw could see Frostfur and Goldenflower clawing and biting at a huge gray Tom. Even the young tabby queen, Brindleface, was fighting, though she was very close to kidding. Darkstripe was locked in a fierce tussle with a black warrior. 3 of the elders, Small Ear, Patchpelt, and One Eye, were nipping bravely at a tortoiseshell that fought with twice their speed and ferocity. The returning cats hurled themselves into battle. Firepaw caught hold of a tabby warrior queen, much larger than him, and sank his teeth deep into her leg. She yelled with pain and turned on him, lashing out with sharp claws, lunging at his neck with her teeth bared. He twisted and ducked to avoid her bite. She couldn't match his speed and managed to grasp her from behind and pull her down into the dirt. With his strong hind legs, he clawed at her back till she squealed and struggled away from him, running headlong into the thick undergrowth that surrounded the camp. Alright, now that the ads are going, I'm going to go ahead and take a short break. So I will be right back. I put something to keep my place. Thank you, Holy, for the hydrate. I'll go ahead and drink some water now. I just had to get up and stretch when the ad started. You know, try to relax a little bit because talking endlessly can get really tiring and also rest my throat for a second. I'm gonna go ahead and start reading again now. Firepaw glanced around to see that Bluestar had arrived. Despite her injuries, she was fighting another tabby. Firepaw had never seen her fight before, but even wounded, she was a powerful opponent. Her victim struggled to escape, but she held him tightly and clawed him so fiercely that Firepaw knew he would bear the scars of this fight for many moons. Then he saw a white ShadowClan cat with jet black paws dragging a ThunderClan elder away from the nursery. Firepaw remembered those unusual dark paws from the gathering. Blackfoot, the ShadowClan deputy, made quick work of killing the elder who had been guarding the kids, and began to reach into the bramble nest with one massive paw. The kids were squealing and mewling, undefended now, as their mothers wrestled with other ShadowClan warriors in the clearing. Firepaw prepared to spring towards the nursery, but a claw sliced painfully down his side, and he whipped around to see a scrawny tortoiseshell leap on top of him. As he slammed into the ground, he tried to call out to the other ThunderClan cats that the kids were in danger. Fighting with all his strength to escape the tortoiseshell's grip, he wrenched his head around so he could see the bramble nest. Blackfoot had scooped 2 kids from their bedding already and was reaching in for a third. Firepaw saw no more as the tortoiseshell raked his belly with her hind claws. Firepaw scrambled onto his feet and crouched low as if in defeat. The trick had worked before, and it worked now. As the tortoiseshell gripped him triumphantly and began to sink her teeth into Firepaw's neck, Firepaw sprang upward as hard as he could and flung the warrior away. He spun around and was on the wounded warrior in an instant. This time he showed no mercy, plunging his teeth deep into the cat's shoulder. The bite sent the she-cat howling into the undergrowth. Firepaw jumped up, dashed over to the nursery, and thrust his head through the nursery entrance. Blackfoot was nowhere to be seen. Inside the nest, crouching over the terrified kits, was Yellowfang. Her gray fur was spattered with blood, and one of her eyes was painfully swollen. She looked up at Firepaw with a ferocious hiss, and realizing it was him, she yelled, "They're okay. I'll protect them." Firepaw looked at her as she calmed the helpless kids, and Brokenstar's dire warning about the ShadowClan rogue flashed through his mind. He didn't have time to think about that now. He would have to trust Yellowfang. He nodded quickly and ducked back out of the brambles. There were now only a few ShadowClan cats left in the camp. Ravenpaw and Greypaw were fighting side by side, lashing out at the Black Tom until he fled howling into the bushes. White Storm and Darkstripe chased the last 2 intruders out of the camp, sending them off with a few extra scratches and bites. Firepaw sat down, exhausted, and stared around the camp. It was devastated. Blood spattered the clearing, and tufts of fur drifted in the dust. The surrounding wall of undergrowth was ripped open where the invaders had crashed through. One by one, the ThunderClan cats gathered beneath the high rock. Greypaw came to sit by him, his sides heaving and blood trickling from a torn ear. Ravenpaw flopped down and began to lick a wound on his tail. The queens ran to the nursery to check on their kits. Firepaw found himself waiting tensely for their return, his view blocked by the other cats. He relaxed when he heard squeals and purrs of joy coming from the bramble nest. Phosphor wove her way back through the crowd, followed by Yellowfang. The White Queen stepped forward and addressed them. "Our kids are well safe, thanks to Yellowfang." A ShadowClan warrior killed Brave Rosetail and was trying to steal them from their nest, but Yellowfang fought them off. It was no ordinary ShadowClan warrior either. Firepaw put in. He was determined to let the clan know how much they owed Yellowfang. I saw him. It was Blackfoot. The Shadow Clan deputy, meowed Brindleface, who had fought so bitterly to protect the unborn kits in her swollen belly. There was a stir at the edge of the group as Bluestar limped forward and made her way over to the apprentices. The grave expression on her face was enough to tell Firepaw that something was wrong. Spotted Leaf is with Lionheart, she murmured. He was injured in battle. Looks bad. She turned her head towards the shadow on the far side of the high rock where the warrior lay, a motionless bundle of dusty golden fur. A high-pitched wail rose from Greypaw's throat, and he raced over to Lionheart. Spotted Leaf, who had been leaning over the ThunderClan deputy, stepped back to let the young apprentice share tongues for the last time with his mentor. As Greypaw's howl of grief echoed around the clearing, Firepaw's fur tingled and his blood ran cold. I just heard the Discord notification. I'm like, who the heck is Discord notifying me right now? And it turns out it's an announcement on fucking Discord instead of someone actually messing with me. Can you imagine that? I thought someone was messing with me. It was the cry he had heard in his dream. For a moment, his head swam, then he gave himself a shake. He had to keep calm, for Greypaw's sake. Firepaw looked at Bluestar, who nodded, and he padded over to join his friend by the high rock. He stopped for a moment beside Spotted Leaf. She looked exhausted and dull-eyed with grief. I can't help Lionheart now, she mewed quietly to him. He is on his way to join StarClan. She pressed her body against Firepaw's side, and he felt comforted by the touch of her warm fur. The other cats looked on in silence as the sun slowly set behind the trees. Finally, Greypaw sat up and cried out, "He's gone!" He laid down again beside Lionheart's body and rested his head on his front paws. The rest of the clan walked silently forward to carry out their own grieving rituals for their beloved deputy. Oh man, that's kind of stuck though. So a little bit about the previous chapters is that this clan, ThunderClan, had already lost a deputy, and now they're losing a second one. Firepaw joined him. He licked Lionheart's neck and murmured, "Thank you for your wisdom. You taught me so much." Then he sat down beside Greypaw and began to gently groom his friend's ears. Bluestar waited until the other cats left before padding quietly up. Greypaw didn't even seem to notice his leader's presence. Firepaw looked away as Bluestar spoke her last words to her old friend. "Oh, what am I going to do without you, Lionheart?" she whispered. Then she limped back to her den and crouched down outside, staring grief-stricken into the distance. She didn't even try to lick clean her bloody, matted fur. It was the first time Firepaw had seen her look utterly defeated, and he felt a chill run through him. He sat with Greypaw and Lionheart until the moon rose high. Ravenpaw joined him, and together they kept company with their grieving friend. Tigerclaw strode over and briefly shared tongues with Lionheart. Firepaw waited to hear what words he would share with his warrior friend, but Tigerclaw remained silent as he licked the matted fur. To Firepaw's confusion, dark Tabby's eyes seemed to be fixed on Ravenpaw, rather than the fallen deputy. Spotted Leaf padded lightly around the camp, tending to the wounds and battered nerves. Firepaw watched her approach Bluestar twice, but each time the leader sent her away to see the others. Only when Spotted Leaf had attended to the wounds of all the other cats did Bluestar allow her to treat her bites and scratches. When she had finished, Spotted Leaf turned and walked back to her den. Bluestar stood and slowly hauled herself up onto the high rock. The clan cats seemed to have been waiting for her. As soon as she had settled herself into her usual spot, they began to gather in the clearing below, unusually silent and sober-faced. Firepaw and Ravenpaw got stiffly to their paws and joined them, leaving Graypaw behind with Lionheart's body. The Gray Apprentice was still lying with his nose resting against Lionheart's cooling golden pelt. Firepaw guessed that Bluestar would excuse Graypaw from the clan meeting this time. "It is nearly moon high," meowed Bluestar, as Firepaw slipped into place next to Ravenpaw. "It is once more my duty, much, much too soon, to name ThunderClan's new deputy." Her voice was tired and cracked with sadness. Firepaw looked from warrior to warrior. They were all looking expectantly at Tigerclaw. Even Whitestorm had turned to watch the dark tabby. From the bold expression on his face and the way his whiskers twitched in anticipation, Tigerclaw seemed to agree with them. Bluestar took a deep breath and continued, "I say these words before the body of Lionheart, so that his spirit may hear and approve my choice." She hesitated. "I have not forgotten how one cat avenged the death of Redtail and brought his battered body back to us. ThunderClan needs this fearless loyalty even more now." Bluestar paused again, then meowed the name loud and clear. Tigerclaw would be the new deputy of ThunderClan. There was a yowl of approval, with the loudest voices belonging to Darkstripe and Longtail. Whitestorm sat calmly, his eyes closed, his tail wrapped neatly around him. He was nodding slowly and approvingly. Tigerclaw lifted his chin proudly, his eyes half closed as he listened to the clan, and he stalked through the crowd, accepting tributes with the smallest of nods, and leaped up onto the high rock beside Bluestar. "ThunderClan," he yelled, "I am honored to accept the position of clan deputy. I never expected to gain such a high rank, but by the spirit of Lionheart, I vow to serve you the best I can." He gravely dipped his head, fixing the crowd with his wide yellow eyes, and jumped down from the high rock. Firepaw heard Ravenpaw murmur, "Oh no," under his breath beside him. He turned to look curiously at his friend. Ravenpaw's head was hanging low. "She should never have chosen him," he muttered. "Are you talking about Tigerclaw?" Firepaw whispered. "He's wanted to be deputy ever since he took care of Redtail." Ravenpaw mewed. He stopped abruptly. "Took care of Redtail?" Firepaw echoed. His mind suddenly raced with questions. What did Ravenpaw know? At the gathering, had his account of the battle with RiverClan been true? Was Tigerclaw responsible for Redtail's death? That is the end of chapter 17. We are going to continue on with chapter 18. Are you telling Firepaw how I protected Redtail? Firepaw felt a cold shiver ruffle the fur on the back of his neck. Ravenpaw whipped around, eyes wide with fear. Tigerclaw loomed over them, his lips drawn into a menacing snarl. Firepaw jumped up and faced the new deputy. He was just saying he wished he had been here to take care of Lionheart as well. That's all, he knew, thinking quickly. Tigerclaw looked from one to the other, then stalked away in silence. Ravenpaw's green eyes clouded with terror, and he started to tremble uncontrollably. Ravenpaw? Firepaw meowed in warning. But Ravenpaw didn't even look up at him. His head held low, he slunk back to Greypaw and crouched next to him. Hello, welcome in. I hope you're enjoying the story so far. We are currently on chapter 18 of the first book of the Warrior Cat series. Greypaw and crouched next to him, pressing his skinny black body next to Greypaw's thick fur as he was suddenly cold. Firepaw looked helplessly at his two friends as they huddled beside Lionheart's body. Not knowing what else to do, he padded over and settled himself beside them, ready to sit out of the night. So, I know you probably just recently got here, and the Warrior Cat series, right now we are pretty deep into the first book. A little synopsis is, at the beginning of the book, we had a cat, or house cat, aka kitty pet that you will sometimes hear in the book, called Rusty. He took off before he got to the Cutters, aka neutered, and became a part of the clan that is spoke of as ThunderClan, and was given the new name of Firepaw. The deputy of the ThunderClan died in a battle with another clan when a couple chapters in, and then a new one was announced, and one of the other clans was driven out by Shadow Clan, and from there we now have the Shadow Clan fighting the Thunder Clan because they refused to give them hunting rights. And with that, they are now trying to attack them and drive them out. And another one of their deputies died, and one got chosen because they're required to choose one before the next moon high. And there is some shady stuff going on with that deputy. There's a lot of hints in it in the book. Huddled beside Lionheart's body, not knowing what else to do, he padded over and settled himself beside them, ready to sit out the night. As the moon passed overhead, other cats came to join their vigil. Bluestar arrived last. Once the camp was calm and quiet, she said nothing, but sat a little way off, gazing at her dead deputy with an expression of such unbearable grief that Firepaw had to look away. At dawn, a group of elders came to take Lionheart's body away to the burial place. Greypaw followed to help dig the hole where the great warrior would rest. Firepaw yawned and stretched. He felt chilled to the bone. Leafall was nearly here now, and the woods were clouded with mist. But above the leaves, Firepaw saw a rosy morning sky. He watched Greypaw disappear into the dew-soaked undergrowth with the elders. Ravenpaw jumped to his paws and hurried back to the apprentice's den. Firepaw followed him slowly. By the time he arrived, the black cat was curled up with his nose tucked under his tail as if asleep. Firepaw was too exhausted to speak. He circled around on his mossy bed, then settled down for a long sleep. "Wake up!" Firepaw heard Dustpaw's voice calling through the den entrance. He opened his eyes. Ravenpaw was already awake, sitting bolt upright with his ears pricked. Greypaw was stirring beside him. Firepaw was surprised to see the familiar gray shape. He hadn't heard him come back after burying Lionheart. Bluestars called another meeting. Dustpaw hissed at them and ducked out of the ferns. The three apprentices crawled out of the warm den. The sun was already past its height, and the air felt cooler than before. Firepaw shivered, and his belly growled. He couldn't remember the last time he had eaten, and he wondered briefly if he would have a chance to hunt today. Firepaw, Greypaw, and Ravenpaw hurried to join the crowd gathered below the high rock. Tigerclaw was speaking from his position beside Bluestar. "During the battle, our leader lost another life. Now that she only has 4 of her 9 lives left, I am going to appoint a bodyguard to stay at her side constantly. No cat will be allowed to approach her unless the guards are present." His amber eyes flicked to Ravenpaw, and then back to the rest of the crowd. "Darkstripe and Longtail," he continued, turning his gaze. "On the warriors, you will act as Bluestar's guards." Darkstripe and Longtail nodded importantly and sat taller. Bluestar now spoke. Her voice sounded gentle and calming after her deputy's commanding yowl. "Thank you, Tigerclaw, for your loyalty. But the clan must understand that I am still here for them. No cat should hesitate to approach me. And I am happy to speak with anyone, with or without my bodyguards." Her eyes darted briefly in Tigerclaw's direction. As the warrior code says, the safety of the clan is more important than the security of any single member. She paused, and her sky-blue gaze rested briefly on Firepaw. "And now, I wish to invite Yellowfang to join ThunderClan." Meows of surprise rose from some of the warriors. Bluestar looked at Frostfur, who nodded her agreement. The other queens looked on silently. Bluestar continued. "Her action last night proved that she is brave and loyal. If she wishes it, we would welcome her as a full member of this clan." Thank you for checking in. From her place at the edge of the crowd, Yellowfang looked up at the clan leader and murmured, "I am honored, Bluestar, and I accept your offer." "Good," meowed Bluestar, her voice firm as if the matter was now closed. Firepaw purred with delight and nudged Greypaw. He was surprised to realize just how much Bluestar's public show of trust in Yellowfang meant to him. Bluestar began to speak again. "Last night, we successfully defended ourselves against ShadowClan, but they are still a great threat. The repair work we need to begin this morning will continue. Our boundaries will be patrolled constantly. We must not assume that the war is over." Tigerclaw stood up, his tail held high, and glared down at the assembled cats. "ShadowClan attacked while we were away from camp," he growled. "They chose their moment well. How did they know that the camp was so poorly defended? Do they have eyes inside our camp?" Firepaw froze in horror as Tigerclaw fixed his cold stare on Ravenpaw. Some of the cats followed their new deputy's gaze and stared in puzzlement at the black apprentice. Ravenpaw looked at the ground and shifted his paws nervously. Tigerclaw went on, "We still have a while before sunset. We must concentrate on rebuilding our camp. Meanwhile, if you suspect anything or anyone, tell me. Be assured anything you say will be in confidence." He nodded to dismiss the clan, then turned and began murmuring to Bluestar. The cats separated and began to move around the camp, assessing damage and forming work groups. "Ravenpaw," Firepaw called. Ad break's gonna start in a minute. Remember to turn down the volume if you haven't already. And I'm going to take a small break as soon as the ads start. I'll keep stretching, I swear. "Ravenpaw," Firepaw called, still shocked by Tigerclaw's dark hint that his own apprentice had betrayed the clan. But Ravenpaw had already bounded away. Firepaw could see him offering to help Halftail and Whitestorm before rushing off to collect twigs so they could patch the holes in the boundary wall. Ravenpaw clearly didn't want to talk. "Let's go and help him," suggested Greypaw. His voice was flat and exhausted. His eyes were dull. "You go. I'll be there in a moment," Firepaw answered. "First, I want to check on Yellowfang, see if she's okay after a fight with Blackfoot." He looked for Yellowfang in her nest by the fallen tree. Now that the ads have started, I'm going to go ahead and stand up and stretch. Give me a moment. Alright, I'm back. Ready to keep going. She was stretched out in the shadows, her eyes thoughtful. Oh, thank you for the follow. I know that you're probably in the ad break. "Firepaw," she purred when she saw him. "I'm glad you have come. I wanted to check that you were alright," Firepaw mewed. "Old habits stay longer than old scents, eh?" meowed Yellowfang with a flash of her old spirit. "I suppose so," Firepaw confessed. "How are you feeling?" "This old leg injury is playing up again, but I'll be fine," Yellowfang told him. "How did you manage to fight Blackfoot off?" Firepaw asked, unable to keep the admiration out of his voice. "Blackfoot's strong, but he's not a clever fighter. Fighting you was more of a challenge." Firepaw looked for the flicker of humor in the old cat's eyes, but there was none. She continued, I've known him since he was a kid. He hasn't changed. A bully, but no brains. Firepaw sat down beside her. I'm not surprised. Bluestar asked you to join the clan, he purred. You certainly showed your loyalty last night. Yellowfang twitched her tail. Perhaps a truly loyal cat would have fought at the side of the clan that raised her. But then I'd be fighting for my two legs, Firepaw pointed out. Yellowfang shot him an admiring glance. Well said, youngster. But then, we've always been a thinker. Sorrow pierced Firepaw's heart as he remembered these were Lionheart's words, too. You miss Shadow Clan? He asked Yellowfang. Yellowfang blinked slowly. I miss the old Shadow Clan, she mewed at last. The way it used to be. Until Brokenstar became leader, Firepaw was curious. Yes, Yellowfang admitted softly. He changed the clan. She gave a wheezy laugh. He always knew how to give a good speech. He could make you believe a mouse was a rabbit if he set his mind to it. Perhaps that is why I was so blind to his faults. The old she-cat stared into the distance, lost in memories. Bet you can't guess who the new Shadow Clan medicine cat is, Firepaw mewed, suddenly remembering what he'd learned at the gathering. It felt moons ago now. His words seemed to shake Yellowfang back into present. Not Running Nose, she meowed. Yup. Yellowfang shook her head. But he can't even cure his own cold. That's what Greypaw said. They purred together for a moment, amused. Firepaw got to his paws. I'll leave you to rest now. Call me if you need anything else today. Yellowfang lifted her head. Before you go, Firepaw, I hear you were in a rat fight. Did they draw blood? It's okay. Spotted Leaf has treated my wounds with Marigold. Sometimes Marigold is not strong enough for rat bites. Go and find a patch of wild garlic to roll in. I think there's some not far from the camp entrance. That would draw out any poisons the rats may have left. Although, she added dryly, your dead mates might not thank me for my advice. Well, I do. Thanks, Yellowfang. Firepaw purred. Go carefully, young one. Yellowfang held his gaze for a moment, then let her chin rest on her front paws and closed her eyes. Firepaw slipped under the branches and around Yellowfang's nest and headed for the gorse tunnel in search of the wild garlic. The sun was setting now, and he could hear the queen settling their kits for the night. Where do you think you're going? Growled a voice from the shadows. It was Darkstripe. Yellowfang told me to go out and... You don't take orders from that rogue, hissed the warrior. Go and help with the repairs. No cat is to leave the camp tonight. He lashed his tail from side to side. Yes, Darkstripe, Firepaw mewed, dipping his head submissively. He turned and muttered, Darkstripe, under his breath, then headed towards the camp boundary, where he could see Greypaw and Ravenpaw busily patching a large hole in the wall of greenery. How's Yellowfang? Asked Greypaw, as Firepaw trotted up. She's fine. She said wild garlic would be good for my rat bites. I was on my way to find some, but Darkstripe ordered me to stay in camp, Firepaw told him. Wild garlic? Mewed Greypaw. I wouldn't mind trying that. My leg still stings. I could sneak out and get some, Firepaw offered. He had resented Darkstripe's offhand treatment and welcomed the chance to outwit him. No one would notice if I slipped out of this hole here. It'd only take a couple of rabbit hops. Ravenpaw frowned, but Greypaw nodded. We'll cover for you, he whispered. Firepaw Firepaw nuzzled him gratefully and jumped out through the tear in the boundary wall. Once outside the camp, he began to make his way to the wild garlic patch, but a sharp tang alerting him easily to its location. The moon was rising in the violet sky as the sun sank below the horizon. A cold breeze ruffled Firepaw's fur. Suddenly, he caught a cat scent carried toward him on the wind. He sniffed cautiously. ShadowClan? No. Just Tiger Claw and 2 other cats. He sniffed the air again. Darkstripe and Longtail? What were they doing here? Curious, Firepaw dropped into a stalking position. He prowled through the undergrowth, paw by paw, keeping downwind so that he was not detected. The warriors were standing in the shadow of a clump of ferns, their heads very close together. Soon, Firepaw was near enough to hear them speak. StarClan knows my apprentice has shown little promise from the start, but I never expected him to turn traitor, growled Tiger Claw. Firepaw's eyes widened, and his fur prickled with shock. It sounded like Tiger Claw intended to do more than just hint that Ravenpaw had betrayed the clan. How long did he say Ravenpaw was missing on the journey to Mothermouth? Asked Darkstripe. Long enough to have traveled to ShadowClan's camp and back, came the deputy's menacing answer. The fur on Firepaw's tail bristled angrily. That's impossible, he thought. He was with us the whole time. Longtail's voice sounded now, high-pitched with excitement. He must have told them that ThunderClan's leader and the strongest warrior had left the camp. Why else would they attack when they did? So a little bit of a snippet of backtrack for some of those that were not here the previous stream. He was with them the entire time, and he was guarding Mothermouth, which is a cave that they stopped at for the clan leader. And it was actually Tiger Claw that was gone for a while, which to us makes it obvious. To them, it's not so obvious. We are the last clan to stand against ShadowClan. We must remain strong, purred Tiger Claw. His tone had become velvety soft now. He waited in silence for a response. It was Darkstripe who answered eagerly, as if he were still Tiger Claw's apprentice, giving the correct answer to a question on hunting techniques. His words made Firepaw breathless with fear, and the clan would be better off without a traitor like Ravenpaw. I have to say I agree with you, Darkstripe, murmured Tiger Claw, his voice heavy with emotion. Even though he's my own apprentice, he trailed off as if he were too upset to say any more. Firepaw had heard enough. Forgetting all about the wild garlic, he turned and crept silently and as quickly as he could back towards camp. He decided not to tell Ravenpaw what he had heard. He would be terrified. Firepaw's mind raced. What could he do? Tiger Claw was the clan deputy, a great warrior, and popular with all the other cats. No one was going to listen to any accusations made by an apprentice, but Ravenpaw was in terrible danger. Firepaw shook himself, trying to clear his head. There was only one thing to do. He must tell what he had heard to Bluestar, and somehow convince her that he was telling the truth. That is the end of chapter 18. We now are going to go ahead and move on to chapter 19. Greypaw and Ravenpaw were still patching the hole when Firepaw reached them. They had left a gap just wide enough for him to squeeze back through. No luck with the garlic, Firepaw panted as he slipped in. Darkstripe's prowling around out there. Never mind, mewed Greypaw. We can get some tomorrow. I'll go and get you some poppy from Spotted Leaf, Firepaw offered. He was worried by the dull look in his friend's eyes. and the way his muscles seemed stiff with pain. "No, do not worry," mewed Greypaw. "I'll be fine." "It's no trouble," Firepaw insisted. And before Greypaw could argue, he bounded off toward Spotted Leaf's den. She was pacing her small clearing, her eyes clouded with unhappiness. "Are you okay?" Firepaw asked. "The spirits of StarClan are restless. I think they are trying to tell me something," she replied, flicking her tail uneasily. "What can I do for you?" "I think Greypaw could do with some poppy seeds for his leg," Firepaw explained. "His rat bites are still hurting him. The pain of losing Lionheart will make his injuries feel worse, but he'll mend in time. Don't worry. In the meantime, you're right. Poppy seeds will help." Spotted Leaf went into her den and brought out a dried poppy head. She placed it carefully on the ground. "Just shake out one or two and give them to him," she meowed. "Thanks," Firepaw mewed. "Are you sure you're okay?" "Go and see to your friend," answered Spotted Leaf, avoiding his gaze. Firepaw picked up the poppy head between his teeth and began to walk away. "You got a timeout? What the heck? And whose chat? Whose chat did you get a timeout for?" Also, hi Yusina, welcome in. "Wait," Spotted Leaf hissed suddenly. Firepaw spun around expectantly and met her tawny gaze. Her eyes burned back at him. "Firepaw," she hissed, "StarClan spoke to me moons ago before you joined the clan. I sense they want me to tell you this now. They said only fire can save our clan." Firepaw stared at Spotted Leaf, mystified. The strange passion faded from her eyes. "Take care, Firepaw." She meowed in her normal voice and turned away. "See you," Firepaw replied uncertainly. He padded back through the fern tunnel. Her strange words were echoing in his mind. You don't know you joined the Raiden chat? Oh. I find it funny. Job application here just seems to get a lot of auto mods. Like, just automatically. I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of funny. That your name is getting you into so much trouble. Like, how the heck? But he could not make sense of them. Why had she shared them with him? Surely fire was an enemy to all who lived in the forest. He shook his head in frustration and bounded over to the apprentice's den. "Greypaw," Firepaw hissed into the ear of his sleeping friend. "Thank you for checking in." They'd been allowed to rest all morning, after working on repairs for most of the night. Tigerclaw had ordered them to be ready to begin training at sun high. The strong yellow light filtering through the den told Firepaw it was already near that now. He had a restless night. Dreams swirled through his mind each time he fell asleep. Confusing and indistinct, but full of darkness and menace. "Greypaw," Firepaw hissed again, but his friend did not stir. He'd eaten 2 of the poppy seeds before he'd slept, and now he was in a deep slumber. "Are you awake, Firepaw?" Ravenpaw mewed from his nest. Firepaw spat silently under his breath. He had wanted to talk to Greypaw before Ravenpaw awoke. Ravenpaw sat up in his bed of moss and heather and began to wash with quick flicks of his tongue. "Are you going to wake him?" he asked, nodding towards Greypaw. A deep voice growled outside their den. "I hope so. Training is about to start." Firepaw and Ravenpaw jumped. "Greypaw, wake up!" Firepaw poked his friend with one paw. "Tigerclaw is waiting." Greypaw lifted his head. His eyes were still heavy with sleep. "Are you ready yet?" called Tiger Claw. Firepaw and Ravenpaw crept out of the den, blinking as they emerged into the sunlight. The deputy was sitting beside the tree stump. "Is this the other one coming?" he asked. "Yes," Firepaw replied, feeling defensive on behalf of his friend. "He's only just woken up. Training will do him good," growled Tiger Claw. "He's grieved for long enough." Firepaw held the menacing amber gaze for a few moments. Warrior and apprentice, for a heartbeat, their eyes were locked as enemies. Graypaw scrambled sleepily out of the den. "Blue Star will be ready for you two in a moment, Firepaw," announced Tiger Claw. The words distracted Firepaw from his anger, his first training session with Blue Star. Excitement surged through him. He had expected his wounded mentor to be resting still. "Graypaw," continued Tiger Claw, "you can join my training session. Do you think you're up to it, Ravenpaw?" He glowered at his apprentice. After all, he got some pretty nasty nettle stings, while the rest of us were fighting those rats. Ravenpaw looked to the ground. "I'm fine," he mewed. Graypaw and Ravenpaw followed the deputy out of the camp entrance. Ravenpaw's head hung low as he disappeared through the gorse tunnel. Firepaw sat and waited for Blue Star. She did not keep him long. The Grey Queen emerged from her den and padded across the clearing. Her fur was still matted in places where her wounds were fresh. But she betrayed no pain in her confident stride. "Come," she called to him. Firepaw noticed with surprise that she was alone. Darkstripe and Longtail were nowhere to be seen. A thought occurred to him, and suddenly his excitement was tinged with anxiety. Here was an opportunity to tell Blue Star what he had overheard last night. He caught up with her as she headed for the gorse tunnel and fell in step behind her. "Will your guards be joining us?" he asked hesitantly. Blue Star replied without looking back. "I've ordered Darkstripe and Longtail to help with the camp repairs. Securing ThunderClan's base is our first priority." Firepaw's heartbeat quickened. He would tell her about Ravenpaw as soon as they left camp. The two cats followed the trail to the training hollow. The path was strewn with freshly fallen golden leaves that rustled beneath their paws. Firepaw's mind raced as he searched for suitable words. What should he tell his leader? That Tiger Claw was plotting to get rid of his apprentice? And what would he say when Blue Star asked him why? Could he bring himself to say out loud what he suspected Tiger Claw had killed Redtail? Even though he had no evidence beyond Ravenpaw's excited storytelling at the gathering. By the time they reached the sandy hollow, Firepaw had still not spoken. The hollow was empty. "I asked Tiger Claw to hold his training session in another part of the forest today," Blue Star explained as he padded into the center of the hollow. "I want to concentrate on your fighting skills, and I want you to concentrate on them too, which means no distractions. I must tell her now," thought Firepaw. She needs to know about the danger Ravenpaw is in. His paws prickled with anxiety. I won't have another chance like this. Sudden movement flashed in the corner of his eye. A swish of gray rolled past his nose, and Firepaw fell forward as his forepaws were knocked lightly from underneath him. He staggered, regained his balance, and spun around to see Blue Star sitting calmly beside him. "Do I have your attention now?" she growled. "Yes, Blue Star. Sorry," he replied hastily, looking into her blue eyes. "That's better. Firepaw, you've been with us for many moons now. I have watched you fight. With rats, you were quick. With the Shadow Clan warriors, you were fierce. You outwitted Greypaw on that very first day we met, and you defeated Yellowfang with your cleverness, too. She paused and lowered her voice in a tense hiss. But one day, you will meet an opponent who is all of these things as well. Quick, fierce, and clever. It's my duty to prepare you for that day. Firepaw nodded, completely caught up in her words. His senses were fully alert. All thoughts of Ravenpaw and Tigerclaw had disappeared, and the musty odors of tiny noises of the forest rushed in upon him. Let's see how you fight, Bluestar ordered. Attack me. Firepaw looked at her, sizing her up and wondering the best way to begin. Bluestar was standing less than 3 rabbit lengths away. She was twice his size, so it'd be a waste of effort to begin with the usual paw swipes and wrestling. But if you could leap straight onto her back with powerful enough jump, you might be able to unbalance her. She hadn't taken her piercing blue eyes off him for an instant. Firepaw stared back and leaped. He had aimed to land squarely on her shoulders, but Bluestar was ready for him. She dropped swiftly into a crouch. As Firepaw hit her, she rolled onto her back. Instead of landing on her shoulders, he found himself crashing toward her belly. She caught him with all 4 paws and flung him easily away from her. Firepaw felt he had been bundled away like a bothersome kid. He hit the dusty ground hard and lay winded for a moment before he scrambled to his feet. Interesting strategy, but your eyes betrayed where you were aiming, growled Bluestar as she stood up and shook the dust from her thick coat. Now try again. This time, Firepaw looked at her shoulders but aimed for her paws. When Bluestar dropped to the ground, it would hit her as she crouched. Firepaw felt a rush of satisfaction as he leaped. But it turned to confusion as Bluestar unexpectedly sprang into the air and let him crash into the ground where she had stood just a heartbeat before. She timed it perfectly. As he landed, she thundered down on top of him, squashing the breath out of him. Now try something I don't expect, she hissed into his ear, climbing off him and backing away with a challenging gleam in her eyes. Firepaw scrambled up, panting, and shook himself crossly. Even Yellowfang had not been so tricky. He hissed and leaped again. This time, as he flew at Bluestar, he stretched out his forepaws. She reared up on her hind legs and used her forepaws to twist him away. As he felt himself slipping, Firepaw scrambled with his hind paws in the sand, but it was too late and he flopped heavily to his side. Firepaw, Bluestar meowed calmly, as once more he struggled to his paws. You're strong and quick, but you must learn to keep control of your speed and body weight so that it is not easy for me to unbalance you. Try again. Firepaw backed away, hot, dusty, and out of breath. Frustration raged through him. He was determined to get the better of his mentor this time. Slowly, he crouched and began to creep towards Bluestar. She mirrored his crouch and hissed into his face as he approached. An ad's going to start in 3 minutes. If you have not already, please remember to lower the volume so that you are not spooked. Thank you. He raised a paw and swiped at her left ear. She ducked to avoid his strike and veered up, towering over him. Quickly, Firepaw rolled to his back, slithered beneath her body, and one fast movement kicked both his hind legs upwards into her belly. Bluestar was flung backwards and fell onto the sandy earth with a loud grunt. Firepaw flipped himself over and leaped to his paws. He felt jubilant, and he saw Bluestar lying in the dirt, and for the first time remembered her words. Had he reopened them? He dashed to her side and stared down at her, to his relief, her eyes glinted proudly back at him. "That was much better," she puffed. She stood and shook herself. "Now it's my turn." She sprang at him, knocking him to the ground, and retreated and let him pick himself up before leaping again. Firepaw braced himself, but she bowled him over easily again. "Look at my size, Firepaw. Don't try to stand up against my attack. Use your wits. If you're fast enough to avoid me, then avoid me." Firepaw scrambled to his feet again, preparing for her attack. This time, he didn't dig his paws into the soft ground, but stood lightly, keeping his weight on his toes. Thank you for the follow. As Bluestar flew towards him, he hopped neatly out of her path, reared up on his hind legs, and with his forepaws, pushed her flying body onwards past him. Bluestar landed gracefully on all four paws and turned. "Excellent. You learn quickly," she purred. "But that was an easy move. Let's see how you deal with this one." They trained until sunset. Firepaw heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Bluestar meow. That's enough for today. She seemed a little tired and stiff, but still leaped easily out of the sandy hollow. Firepaw scrambled after her. His muscles were aching and his head spinning with all he had learned. As they trekked together back through the trees, he couldn't wait to tell Graypaw and Ravenpaw about his training session. And it wasn't until they reached the camp boundary that Firepaw realized he'd forgotten to tell Bluestar about Ravenpaw. That is the end of chapter 19, and we are now going to be on chapter 20, the last chapter for the stream. I'm going to take a quick break since the ads have started and take a stretch. I will be right back. I am back. I'm opening the page back to where it was. Alright. Chapter 20. By the time Firepaw returned, the camp was starting to look a little better. Parties of cats had clearly been patching and repairing continuously through the day. Phosphor and Goldenflower were still busy fortifying the nursery walls, but the outer wall looked solid and secure once more. Firepaw trotted across the clearing to see if there was any fresh kill around. He passed Sandpaw and Dustpaw, who were preparing to leave for the next patrol. "Sorry," mewed Sandpaw. As Firepaw sniffed hopefully at the eating area, we ate the last 2 mice. Firepaw shrugged. He would catch something for himself later. He headed back to the apprentice's den, where Greypaw was sitting with his back resting against the tree stump, licking a forepaw. "Where's Ravenpaw?" Firepaw asked as he sat down. "Not back from his task yet," replied Greypaw. "Look at that." He held out his paw for Firepaw to inspect. The pad was torn and bleeding. Tigerclaw sent me fishing, and I stepped on a sharp stone in the stream. "That looks pretty deep. You should get Spotted Leaf to look at it," Firepaw advised. "Where did Tigerclaw send Ravenpaw, by the way?" "Don't know. I was up to my belly in cold water," muttered Greypaw. He stood up and limped away towards Spotted Leaf's den. Firepaw settled down, his eyes fixed on the entrance of the camp, and waited for Ravenpaw. After overhearing the warriors' conversation last night, he couldn't shake the feeling that something dreadful was going to happen to his friend. His heart lurched as he saw Tigerclaw enter the camp alone. He waited longer. The moon was high in the sky. Surely Ravenpaw should be back by now. Firepaw found himself wishing he'd spoken to Bluestar when he'd had the chance. He could see Darkstripe and Longtail guarding her den now, and he certainly didn't want them to overhear his concerns. "Hello, welcome in. The Fox's Wisdom? I guess it really depends on the topic. I mean, right now we are currently reading the Warriors into the Wild Book 1. We are on chapter 20, which is the final chapter for the stream. I've been doing 5 chapters every Friday. But if you want to know, like, the snippet of this story is you have a house cat named Rusty. He gets taken in by one of the clans in the forest, and his name is now Firepaw. The clan that he joined, he had about foxes. So, if you want to know about foxes, foxes actually do make sounds. They yip, they bark, they scream, and they are also actually very smelly creatures if they are not constantly taking baths. They also like to tear into things and are very, very cunning creatures. Hi there, it's my first time here, feeling a little bit shy. Don't worry, thank you for joining us. I hope you have been liking the story so far. Again, I am on chapter 20. I just started it, and this is the final chapter for this stream. I have been doing, again, 5 chapters every Friday, and I have the entire series. This is book 1, and I'm probably going to go through the entire series. So that's 5 chapters each Friday, which is, it takes a minimum of 2 hours to read that many chapters aloud. I have the physical copies, as you can hear. But thank you for joining. I am Mabisuki, the Kitsune Gamer. Don't mind my sticky. I didn't put it down far enough. Anyway, back to reading. We waited longer. The moon was high in the sky. Surely Ravenpaw should be back by now. Firepaw found himself wishing he'd spoken to Bluestar when he had the chance. He could see Darkstripe and Longtail guarding her den now, and he certainly didn't want them to overhear his concerns. Tigerclaw had brought back fresh kill, which he was sharing with Whitestorm outside the warrior's den. Firepaw realized he was very hungry. Perhaps he should go and hunt. He might come across Ravenpaw outside the camp. As he wondered what to do, Firepaw saw Ravenpaw trotting through the entrance of the camp. A thrill of relief raced through him, and not just because Ravenpaw was holding fresh kill between his teeth. The apprentice came straight over to Firepaw and dropped the mouthful of food on the ground. Enough for all three of us, he mewed proudly. And it should taste extra good. It's from Shadow Clan territory. Firepaw gasped. You hunted in Shadow Clan territory? That was my task, Ravenpaw explained. Tiger Claw sent you into enemy territory to hunt. Firepaw could hardly believe it. We must tell Blue Star. That was too dangerous. At the mention of Blue Star's name, Ravenpaw shook his head. His eyes looked hunted and shadowed with fear. Look, just keep quiet, okay? He hissed. I survived. I even caught some prey. That is all there is to it. Shh. Tiger Claw's looking. Just eat your share and keep quiet, snapped Ravenpaw. Firepaw shrugged and took a piece of the fresh kill. Ravenpaw ate quickly, avoiding Firepaw's eye. Shall we save some for Greypaw? He asked after a while. He went to see Spotted Leaf, Firepaw mumbled through a mouthful. He cut his paw. I don't know when he'll be back. We'll save him whatever you want, replied Ravenpaw, suddenly sounding worn out. I'm tired. I need to sleep. He stood up and pushed his way into the den. Firepaw stayed outside, watching the rest of the camp prepare for the night. He was going to have to tell Ravenpaw what he'd overheard in the forest last night. He needed to know just how much danger he was in. Tiger Claw was lying beside White Storm, sharing tongues, but with one eye fixed on the apprentice's den. Firepaw yawned to show Tiger Claw how exhausted he was, then got to his paws and followed Ravenpaw inside. Ravenpaw was asleep, but Firepaw could tell from his twitching paws and whiskers that he was dreaming. He knew it wasn't a good dream by the tiny mews and squeaks Ravenpaw was making. Suddenly, the Black Warrior cat leapt to his paws, his eyes stretched wide in terror. Thank you for the follow, and thank you for the check-in as well. His fur was standing on end, and his back arched. Ravenpaw, Firepaw meowed in alarm. Calm down. You're in our den. There's only me here. Ravenpaw looked around wildly. It's just me, Firepaw repeated. Ravenpaw blinked and seemed to recognize his friend. He collapsed onto his bed. Ravenpaw mewed Firepaw seriously. There's something you need to know. Something I heard last night when I was out looking for wild garlic. Why do crabs never volunteer? Because they're shellfish. Yeah, I mean, but they also taste delicious. They obviously volunteer for being eaten. Nom nom nom. Ravenpaw looked away, still trembling from his dream, but Firepaw persisted. Ravenpaw, I heard Tiger Claw telling Darkstripe and Longtail that you betrayed ThunderClan. He told them that you slipped away during the trip to Mothermouth, but told ShadowClan that the camp was unguarded. Ravenpaw spun round to face Firepaw. But I didn't, he exclaimed, horrified. Of course you didn't, Firepaw agreed. But Darkstripe and Longtail believe you did, and Tiger Claw persuaded them that they should get rid of you. Ravenpaw was speechless, his breath coming in gasps. Why would Tiger Claw want to get rid of you, Ravenpaw? Firepaw asked gently. He's one of the clan's strongest warriors. What threat are you to him? Firepaw suspected he already knew the answer, but he wanted to hear the truth from Ravenpaw's own mouth. He waited while Ravenpaw fumbled for words. At last, the Black Apprentice crawled closer to Firepaw and whispered hoarsely into his ear. Because the RiverClan deputy didn't kill Redtail, Tiger Claw did. Firepaw nodded silently, and Ravenpaw continued, his whisper cracking with tension. Redtail killed the RiverClan deputy, so Tiger Claw didn't kill Oakheart. Firepaw couldn't help interrupting. Ravenpaw shook his head. No, he didn't. After Redtail had killed Oakheart, Tiger Claw ordered me back to the camp. I wanted to stay, but he yelled at me to go, so I ran into the trees. I should have carried on running, but I couldn't leave while they were still fighting. I turned and crept back to see if Tiger Claw needed help. By the time I got near, all the RiverClan warriors had fled, leaving just Redtail and Tiger Claw. Redtail was watching the last warrior running away, and Tiger Claw, Ravenpaw paused and gulped. Tiger Claw jumped on him. He sank his teeth into the back of his neck, and Redtail fell to the ground, dead. That's when I ran. I don't know if Tiger Claw saw me or not. I just kept running until I got back to the camp. Why didn't you tell Bluestar? Firepaw pressed gently. Would she have believed me? Ravenpaw's eyes rolled wildly. Do you believe me? Of course I do, Firepaw mewed. He licked Ravenpaw between the ears in an effort to calm and comfort his friend. He was going to have to find another opportunity to tell Bluestar about Tiger Claw's treachery. Don't worry, I'll sort it out, he promised. Meanwhile, make sure you stick close to me or Graypaw. Hydrated or the fish gets it. Well, I don't like fish, so go ahead. I don't eat fish, it upsets my tummy. Goodbye, fish. Does Graypaw know about them wanting to get rid of me? Not yet, but I'll have to tell them. It is a gay fish. Oh, I see, because it has a rainbow on it. Okay, that. Why does that make it a difference if I like fish or not? Like, I don't understand that. It's absolute no difference to me. It's just a fish. I don't eat fish. Goodbye, fish. Not yet, but I'll have to tell him. Ravenpaw settled silently onto his belly and stared ahead. It's okay, Ravenpaw, Firepaw purred, touching the skinny black body with his nose. I'll help you get out of this. Graypaw padded into the den at dawn. Sandpaw and Dustpaw had returned from the patrol a while ago and were asleep in their nests. Hi, mewed Graypaw, sounding more cheerful than he had for days. Firepaw woke at once. You sound better, he purred. Graypaw licked Firepaw's ear. Spotted Leaf put some gunk on my cut and made me lie still for hours. I must have fallen asleep. By the way, I hope that chaffinch out there was for me. I was starving. It was. Ravenpaw caught it yesterday. Tiger Claw sent him into... Shut up, you two, growled Sandpaw. Some of us are trying to sleep. Graypaw rolled his eyes. Come on, Firepaw, he mewed. Brindleface has had her kits. Let's go and visit them. Firepaw purred with pleasure. At last, something for ThunderClan to celebrate. He looked down at Ravenpaw, who was still sleeping, and padded out of the den. With Graypaw, he trotted across the clearing toward the nursery. The rising sun made his pelt glow with warmth, and he stretched appreciatively, reveling in the suppleness of his spine and the strength of his legs. Stop showing off, Graypaw called over his shoulder. Firepaw stopped stretching and bounded after his friend. White Storm was sitting outside the nursery guarding the entrance. Have you two come to see the new kits? He meowed as Firepaw and Graypaw approached. Firepaw nodded. One at a time only. You'll have to wait. Bluestar's with her now, White Storm told them. Well, you can go first, Firepaw offered. I'll go and see Yellowfang while I'm waiting. He dipped his head respectfully to Whitestorm and headed off toward Yellowfang's nest. The old cat was watching behind her ears, her eyes half crossed with concentration. Don't tell me you're expecting rain, Firepaw teased. Yellowfang looked up. You've been listening to too many elders' tales, she meowed. What would be the point of a cat washing its ears if they're only going to get rained on anyway? Firepaw's whiskers twitched with amusement. Are you going to see Brindleface's new litter? He asked. Yellowfang stiffened and she shook her head. I don't think I'd be very welcome, she growled. But they know you saved, Firepaw began. A she-cat is very protective of her newborns, especially when it's her first litter. I think I'll stay away. Yellowfang replied in a tone that invited no argument. As you wish, but I'm going to see them. Must be a good sign having new kits in the camp. Yellowfang shrugged. Sometimes, she muttered darkly. Firepaw turned and trotted back to the nursery. Clouds had covered the sun, making the air turn fresher. A fierce breeze tugged at his fur and rustled leaves around the clearing. Bluestar was sitting outside the nursery behind her. Greypaw's tail was just disappearing into the narrow entrance. Firepaw, she greeted him. Have you come to see the ThunderClan's newest warriors? The ThunderClan leader sounded tired and sad. Firepaw was surprised. Surely the kits were good news for ThunderClan. Yes, I have, he replied. Well, if you've finished, come and see me in my den. Yes, Bluestar, Firepaw mewed as she walked slowly away. He felt his fur prickle. Here was another chance to speak to Bluestar alone. Perhaps StarClan was on his side after all. Greypaw crawled out of the nursery entrance. They're really cute, he mewed. But I'm starving now. I'm off to find some fresh kill. I'll save some for you if I find any. He blinked affectionately at Firepaw and bounded away. Firepaw purred a goodbye and looked up at Whitestorm, who nodded his permission for him to enter the nursery. Firepaw squeezed through the tiny entrance. 4 tiny kits huddled warmly in Brindleface's deeply lined nest. Their fur was pale gray with darker flecks, just like their mother, except for one tiny dark red tom. They mewed and squirmed beside Brindleface's belly, their eyes shut tight. How are you feeling? Firepaw whispered to her. A little tired, answered Brindleface. She looked down proudly at her litter, but the kits are all strong and healthy. ThunderClan is lucky to have them, Firepaw purred. I was just talking about them to Yellowfang. Brindleface didn't answer, and Firepaw couldn't miss the look of worry that flashed in her eyes as she nudged a stray kit closer to her. Firepaw felt a tremor of anxiety in his belly. Bluestar may have accepted Yellowfang into ThunderClan, but it looked like the old cat was still not trusted by all the clan. He touched his nose affectionately to Brindleface's flank, and turned and made his way out to the clearing. The clan leader was waiting for Firepaw at the entrance to her den. Longtail sat at her side. The pale tabby warrior stared hard at Firepaw as he approached. Firepaw ignored his gaze and looked expectantly at Bluestar. Come inside, she meowed, turning to lead the way. Firepaw trotted after her. Longtail immediately stood up as if to follow them. Bluestar looked at him over her shoulder. I think I'll be safe enough with young Firepaw, she meowed. Longtail looked uncertain for a moment and sat down again outside the entrance. Firepaw had never been inside Bluestar's den. He padded after her through the lichen that draped its entrance. Brindleface's kits are lovely, he purred. Bluestar looked serious. Lovely they may be, but they mean more mouths to feed, and the season of Leaf Bear will soon be here. Then she glanced at Firepaw, who was unable to hide his surprise at her melancholy tone. Oh, don't listen to me, meowed Bluestar, shaking her head impatiently. The first cold wind always worries me. Come, make yourself comfortable. She tipped her head towards the dry, sandy floor. Firepaw dropped onto his belly and stretched his paws out in front of him. Bluestar circled slowly on her mossy nest. I'm still aching from my training session yesterday, she admitted, when she had finally settled herself and curled her tail around her paws. You fought well, young one. For once, Firepaw didn't stop to bask in her praise. His heart was thumping. This was the perfect moment to tell his leader his fears about Tiger Claw. He lifted his chin, ready to speak, but it was Bluestar who spoke first, staring past him at the far wall of her den. I can still smell the stale stench of ShadowClan in the camp, she murmured. I hope never to see the day when our enemy broke into the heart of ThunderClan. Firepaw nodded in silent agreement, sensing Bluestar was going to say more. And so many deaths, she sighed. First Redtail, then Lionheart. I think StarClan, at least the warriors we have left, are strong and loyal like them. At least with Tiger Claw as deputy, ThunderClan may still be able to defend itself. Firepaw's heart plummeted, an icy chill cut deep into him as Bluestar went on. There was a time when Tiger Claw was a young warrior that I feared for the strength of his passion. Such energy can need careful channeling, but now I am proud to see how much respect the clan has for him. I know he is ambitious, but his ambition makes him one of the bravest cats I have ever had the honor to fight alongside. Firepaw knew at once that he could not tell Bluestar his suspicions about Tiger Claw, not when Bluestar looked to her deputy to protect the whole clan. He would have to save Ravenpaw himself. He took a deep breath and blinked slowly, so that when Bluestar turned and looked directly into his eyes, no trace of his shock and disappointment remained. Her next words were quiet and full of concern. You know Brokenstar will return. He made it clear at the gathering that he wants hunting rights in all territories. We fought him off once. We can do it again. Firepaw insisted. That's true, Bluestar acknowledged with a wry nod. StarClan will honor your courage, young Firepaw. She paused and licked a healing wound on her side. I think you ought to know that, in battle with rats, it is not my 5th life that I lost, but my 7th. Firepaw sat and bolted upright, shocked. Bluestar went on. I have let the clan believe it was my 5th because I don't want them to fear for my safety. But 2 more lives, now I have to leave you to join StarClan. Firepaw's mind was racing. Why was she telling him this? Thank you for sharing this with me, Bluestar, he purred respectfully. Bluestar nodded. I am tired now, she rasped. Off you go, and Firepaw, I don't expect you to repeat this conversation to anyone. Of course, Bluestar replied as he nosed. As Firepaw replied, I'm just, hang on a second, I'm gonna get some water. My tongue is catching a little dry. Of course, Bluestar, Firepaw replied as he nosed his way out through the curtain of lichen. Longtail was still sitting by the entrance. Firepaw stepped past him and made his way towards the den. He didn't know which part of his conversation with Bluestar had been more bewildering. He stopped in his tracks by a yowl of horror coming from the nursery. Frostfur came sprinting into the clearing, her tail bristling and her eyes wide with alarm. My kids, Someone has taken my kits. Tiger Claw bounded over to her. He called to the clan. Quick, search the camp. Whitestorm, stay where you are. Warriors, patrol the camp boundary. Apprentices, search every den. Firepaw rushed to the nearest den, the warriors, and pushed his way inside. It was empty. He scrambled through the bedding with his paws, but there was neither sight nor scent of Frostfur's kits. He charged outside and headed for his own den. Ravenpaw and Greypaw were already inside, pushing aside their nests, sniffing every corner. Dustpaw and Sandpaw were searching the Elder's den. Firepaw left them to it and charged from one clump of grass to another, pushing his muzzle into them, ignoring the nettles that stung his nose. There was no sign of the kids anywhere. He looked around the camp boundary. Warriors paced backwards and forwards, urgently sniffing the air. Suddenly, Firepaw spotted Yellowfang in the distance. She was pushing her way through an unguarded part of the fern wall. She must have found a scent, he thought, and raced towards her as her tail disappeared into the greenery. By the time he arrived at the fern wall, she had gone. He sniffed the air. No kit scent, just the bitter smell of Yellowfang's fear. What was she afraid of? Firepaw wondered. Tiger Claw's yowl sounded from the bushes behind the nursery. All the cats raced over to him, headed by Frostfur. They crowded as closely as they could, jostling to see through the dense undergrowth. Firepaw nosed his way forward and saw Tiger Claw standing over a motionless bundle of dampled fur. Spotted Leaf. Firepaw stared in disbelief at her lifeless body. Fury rose in him like a dark cloud, and he felt the blood roaring in his ears. Who could have done this? Bluestar stepped through the crowd and leaned over the medicine cat. She has been killed by a warrior blow, she meowed softly. Firepaw craned his neck and saw a single wound on the back of Spotted Leaf's neck. His head swam when he suddenly was unable to see clearly. Through his grief, Firepaw heard a murmur at the back of the crowd that swelled into a single piercing yowl. Yellowfang is gone. That is the end of chapter 20, as well as the last chapter for the stream. If you wish for me to read out to anyone, make sure you tell me before I try to find someone where I'd end the stream. Other than that, I thank you guys for coming today. Next Friday, I will do the last 5 chapters, and hopefully I will move on to the next book on the following Friday after that. But I thank everyone for joining me and coming in today. I appreciate you being here, and I will see you later. Abisuki, out.